Hi, it's me, Kay Cook, and I'm here for another Live Thrive conversation, a very interesting conversation with a super interesting colleague and friend, inspiring your resilience in this ongoing opportunity for us all. And today I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark Chambers, friend, colleague. I don't know what else we'd call. Oh, you're a teacher of mine as well. You're teaching me mindfulness at the moment. And Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Kay. Lovely to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. So Mark, I mean, gosh, you and I have crossed paths for many years, more than a decade, probably best part of 15 years in various situations on different training courses. We seem to be really interested in the same things, and that is well-being. What would you say would be the big chunk of your interest?
Helping people help themselves feel better. Essentially, that's my kind of elevator pitch, really. That's what I do. And I was a GP for 38 years. I still am a GP, but sort of resting, I suppose, would be the right way to put it, although the NHS seem interested in bringing me back into the fold again. So that's something that is in the wings at the moment, but just as things are, not happening yet. So I'm, since I retired from general practice 3 years ago, I've been running a coaching and clinical hypnosis practice, which keeps me busy, and doing quite a lot of teaching hypnosis to doctors and medical staff, and teaching mindfulness to anybody who wants to learn. That's been really the big thing for me for 10 to 15 years now, almost about the same sort of length of time as I've known Kay, really. I got introduced to mindfulness and got curious about it, mainly because patients were talking about mindfulness, and I thought I'd better find out what it was about, really. So that's been a large part, and it's advised a lot of the way I approach my work now.
And mindfulness, it's a word that I think a lot of people use easily, and they think they know what it is, and I certainly used to think I knew what it was. How would you describe mindfulness?
Yeah, good. That's a very fair question. So my interest came when patients were coming back saying that they'd been referred by various practitioners, and usually for the emotional and psychological things for mindfulness treatment. And what they were describing were mindfulness-based interventions of various sorts. So mindfulness as part of the process, but a lot of psychoeducation. And what they were describing was a lot of cognitive content exercises and things to be doing with their thinking mind. And I looked into this, and my understanding, I was guided by one of my local colleagues, osteopath, who was very interested, and introduced me, was the person who introduced me. I got really interested in training in NLP, suggesting I should do it, getting on for 20 years ago now. And he said, if you want to know about mindfulness, then go and start reading Thich Nhat Hanh's work. He's the Vietnamese Buddhist monk whose work, The Miracle of Mindfulness, was published soon after the Vietnamese War, when he was exiled to France, and just a little pamphlet of instruction back to his people in Saigon, where he'd had to leave, who were struggling without him. And there's a very short and very simple booklet with just a very simple instruction, essentially. And his definition of mindfulness, getting around to answering your question, he describes mindfulness as 5 words: the practice of conscious awareness. And in our teaching, we bring that. I teach with a colleague, Jenny Thornton. We teach a mindfulness program. And that's essentially the basis of it, is just helping people, paring away all the cognitive content and coming back to this awareness, the practice of conscious awareness. So it's a practice, it's something we do, and the thing that we do is consciously pay attention, but without any content. So it's like having, regarding our brain or our awareness, if you like a radio, and just having it switched on but not actually tuned into a station. So just being in the prepared state. So a nice state of equanimity, so nothing to respond to, nothing to react to, but just being awake and aware in a non-reactive way.
So how do you handle an inquiry like, well, what's in it for me? Why should I? How would you respond to that?
Usually, I don't get many inquiries like that. Usually fairly indirect. People come to see me because either I was their doctor for many years, or they knew me, or in this role I have for 3 years, I get quite a lot of referrals from my old colleagues, old consultant colleagues, who couldn't, people weren't responding to a kind of a standard Western medical approach to their issues. There are other things going on. So I don't regard mindfulness as a sort of therapeutic intervention. It's not a treatment. It's a skill. It's an ability that is part of our natural human condition, which is really where I kind of started getting interested about it, because it's not a therapeutic thing. There are mindfulness-based stress reduction, John Kabat-Zinn's work, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, Mark Williams and his colleagues in Oxford. They use an understanding of mindfulness as a way of getting people into the starting blocks, and then start putting their therapeutic interventions onto this basis, having established this place to start from. Some people do come because they know I teach mindfulness and come curious about that specifically, but people who are coming because they've been labelled with an illness or had some sort of psychological or emotional label attached to them usually aren't particularly bothered about what particular approach we're going to use. They just come with an expectation and a hope and some motivation that in some way we're going to find a way forward for them. And my interest was always in my work as the refuge of the diagnostically and therapeutically destitute, and these people had the kind of Western type labels attached to them, often so-called kind of psychosomatic complaints, if you like. So things like irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, these very definite symptomatic unpleasant conditions that people have. They definitely have stuff going on for them. They're aware and they have unpleasant feelings. They're diseased, rather than, but the Western medicine hasn't found a specific disease. There isn't a pharmacological approach to alter physiology or a lump or something to chop out or remove. There's no active external thing that can be done to help them. And so the interest in mindfulness is helping them access what they already have, the resources they have, what they need. Right back to Hippocrates, the Hippocratic Oath, natural forces within us are the true healers of dis-ease. And the problem is that thinking gets in the way. So all we have to do is to still the mind, just stop this, and what we seek can then emerge.
Yeah, there's something about that sort of just stilling and opening up, isn't there? This enormous, I think one of our NLP presuppositions is all the resources a person needs are within them, which builds on, Hippocrates' quote. But do you find, well, I certainly find, and I'm offering it to you, that there's a big struggle to, I'm convinced because I don't work that hard, but a lot of people don't believe that. They don't believe that the healing is within them and the resources are within them. They believe that the responsibility for their well-being is with their GP or with a medicine or with somebody's fault or solution or whatever. Sometimes I find that, a lot of the catching people and just leading them towards this experience of how good it feels when you can expand the inner worlds and find new resources. Do you recognize that sort of process? Is that how it is, or have you already answered the question in your earlier?
I don't think so. No, I don't. What the thoughts going through my mind in response to what you asked, whether I'm answering the question correctly or not, you'll have to tell me. But I think that most of the work, if work it is in the preparation. It's getting people to that place where they're ready to start to make some change, because it's all, the work is about change. And people come because they don't feel right, they're not right, but they don't know what to do. If they knew what to do, they would go away and get on and do it. They come when their dissociations become intolerable to them. I want this, but this is happening. And the two, Milton Erickson's work, a great influence on my career. And he said that disease occurs when the conscious and the unconscious mind have lost rapport with each other. The body being the unconscious mind, the conscious mind being the thing saying, well, I want this, but not doing it. And stuff happens that gets in the way. And rather than pathologizing that and seeing it as an illness, as a disease, I think it's been one of the great problems with the Western approach to psychotherapy, is that it pathologizes these processes. Stuff is happening within the individual, that is disintegrating, taking these parts apart, and rather than working as a coherent whole, or wanting this, what resources have we got, and delivering, it's seen as disease and something that needs to be pathologized and treated. I think I'm probably going off on a bit of a tangent here, but the whole work is preparation. You know, Socrates, you know, then the student's ready, the master appears. You know, so so I don't regard what I do as treatment. I don't market myself as a therapist. You know, the original meaning of doctor, the Latin word doceo docere, means I teach. You know, doctor is a teacher. So my job, or our job in the caring, in my view, is creating the environment, the place where people can come in safety, into a nurturing, supporting environment where they can do the learning that their experience, whatever is happening in their life, you know, to encourage. It's a bit more like midwifery, if you like. It's, you know, something is trying to emerge through them, and just allowing that process to take place, so that the symptoms, because the unconscious mind doesn't have a voice, it can't talk, can't say I want this, I need that. So it talks with symptoms, with emotions. And if we don't listen enough, it talks with lumps and bumps and all the rest of it. Until we take notice and start saying, okay, what's this trying to teach me? What am I supposed to be learning from this? And create a welcoming place of curiosity where we can allow our creativity to engage and let something develop and emerge.
Yeah.
So the kind of the little kind of rule of thumb, if that's a bit airy fairy, you know, if people come and they want change work, you know, three things basically. They need to know what they want. So we spend a lot of time, you know, clarifying, or can spend a lot of time clarifying. You know, NLP terms, well-formed outcomes or something. They need to have some clear idea, because they almost always come say, look, I don't want to feel like this anymore. That's fine. You know, when you know what you do want to feel like, so we've got something to work towards, and we can start doing some useful stuff together. So they need to know what they want. They need to take responsibility for it. So, you know, I can't do anything for them other than to help them, to coach and help them towards goals that they identify for themselves that are consistent with their values and congruent for them. And it has to be now. It's on that line. Only a few weeks ago, I had someone come and see me, because I'm working privately now, but people, you know, choose to come, and they know I'm around. And she came in, and I send people a questionnaire before I start, and she filled that in very, very sketchily. And usually, in my experience, is the more detail people put in their preparation questionnaire, the better outcome they get. So if it's kind of yes, no, I want to stop smoking, yes, no, and I'll do whatever you tell me, kind of thing, you know, not going to get very far with them necessarily. But anyway, there's a smoking one, want to stop smoking, blah, blah. And she came and sat down, she said, well, I'm ready. I said, what do you mean you're ready? I said, well, so don't you remember me? I said, well, you contacted me a few weeks ago, I sent you a questionnaire, and you sent me some pretty straightforward answers. I said, no, I came to see you as a patient 10 years ago and asking if you could help me to stop smoking. And I said, well, yeah. I said, can you stop me smoking? I said, well, I can't stop or start, but I can, when you're ready, I can help you. And she said, well, that's what you said. I said, well, yeah, well, I'm ready now. So 10 years waiting for it. So I didn't waste a lot of appointments between now and then. But I'd forgotten that we'd had that conversation. But you know, she'd obviously, you know, people, their conversations over their doctor are obviously very important to them, and they remember every detail. And to my shame, I'd forgotten that one interaction. It's probably the only time I'd ever seen her as a patient, you know, because she'd been kind of sent to me because I could help people with these things. And brief conversation, and that was it. Anyway, so it's the challenge, or the thing that takes the time, is getting people to threshold, you know, and when they're ready, and you just need to be setting them up, and just a gentle nudge to help them to step into the unknown a little bit, and embrace their fear of failure, and get them into a place where they're not afraid of failing, but they're not afraid of failing enough, and, you know, go and have a go and create a safe landing place for them, so that if things don't work out, that they're not abandoned. Because I say the problem with Western psychotherapy is this idea, you know, I'm okay, you've got the problem, you know, there's some sort of, you know, there's some pathologizing going on, and isolating them. And, you know, psychopathology is the study of isolation, and yeah, that's the great problem that I saw with the kind of the way I was trained to treat emotional and psychological problems as though they were problems. You know, even slipped into the language there, you know, their information there, the unconscious desperately seeking to communicate.
Yeah, I absolutely, you know, I'm completely aligned with those views, and certainly my experience too. There is something about the whole alignment process, isn't there, of whole self, holistic well-being, and you know, these are are simple but very powerful directors for us. And by the way, I just, your point about education is just bang on. That's how I view every single interaction. It's an opportunity for me to help somebody to learn something more about themselves. Whether they know it today or tomorrow isn't so important, but just connecting them in. So sort of coming back to the mindfulness, the conscious awareness, the practice of conscious awareness, what would you say for you has been the most profound ability or exercise in conscious awareness that you've discovered, you've practiced, and you're not letting go of it under any circumstance?
I'm not sure if I'm answering accurately what the question you're asking, but the skill that emerges for it is this ability just to stop and become aware from a slightly dispassionate place, a slightly disassociated place of what's going on. This ability to just create a little bit of space so that we can respond rather than react. When stuff happens, when we become stressed, we default to our level of training, not to our level of expertise. The patterns will kick in, and we just default almost, pretty much immediately, instantaneously to some dissociated pattern. And almost, while we're still doing it, oh God, I know I'm going to say, I wish I could stop myself, or why am I doing this? I want to lose weight, but every time I go into the kitchen, I walk in, open the fridge, and have another piece of pork pie, and then say, why on earth did I do that? I promised myself I wouldn't do it today, etc., etc. But there's just allowing that little bit of space, stop and just become aware. And saying that Hans definition, the practice of conscious awareness, the way we do this by paying attention to our breathing. So this is bringing the mind. The mindfulness is bringing the mind back into the body. So emptying the mind. And by doing that, we give the conscious mind a job. It's just become aware of the breathing and bring attention to the breathing. So in the training, we spend a lot of time, particularly when people are starting, just repeating this over and over again, just as soon as the thoughts come, particularly in the meditation practice. To be mindful, you don't have to meditate. There are a lot of myths about mindfulness, and you don't have to meditate. And meditation, in my understanding, simply is the process of coming back to center. So media, center, middle. It's the process of coming back to the middle. So it's a good idea to do this, but you don't need to do formal meditations. You can use every breath as an opportunity just to become aware of that and just come back to center and just be aware of where it's coming in and where we're feeling it in the body. So coming out of the head and into the body. So that's kind of the simplest exercise, the simplest bit that you can do. And as soon as you've done that, that's created that little bit of space. Okay, here I am about to go off. I want to stop, take a breath or two, just become aware of where it is. Okay, what is it that was bothering me? And even better, even just kind of almost floating out into a kind of a clean third place and say, oh, there's Mark feeling a bit upset about something. And then the Ericksonian mantra, that's interesting. Something's waking up. I'm sure that makes sense. Welcome. And finding this safe holding place where with equanimity and clarity can start to look at what's going on and then step back in and observe, having taken note of what's going on, for some options, step back in and engage and take some action appropriate to what's going on. So just moving that, just increasing that space, between the old psychological model of cause and effect, is a pretty bogus idea nowadays. I think it's only psychology and social sciences that I think in terms of cause and effect. Since Niels Bohr invented quantum physics in 1917 or whatever, we live in this world, this quantum universe of infinite possibility. So stimulus and response happens. So with this approach, we're just seeking to put that little bit of space between stimulus and response. So when the trigger comes, instead of just defaulting into the dissociated response, we just put that little bit of space in. Epictetus, 135 AD. The only choice we have in the moment, or all we have in the moment is we don't have any choice, but we don't have any control rather, but we have choice about our response. Yeah. Viktor Frankl, the concentration camp survivor, the only freedom you can't take away from a person is their freedom to choose how they're going to respond. And if we just leave it to our unconscious conditioned patterning, we'll go down the same old route time and time again. As soon as we can just put that little bit of gap in there, even just one breath's worth, and say, okay, I've got a choice now. You know, I can go down the old path, or I can explore doing things differently. You know, with a sense of curiosity and being prepared to fail and all the rest of it. But, you know, just, you know, I've got two ways of doing something where I only had one in the past. So that's the useful thing. It's this noting. So when stuff happens, just be able to stop, take a breath, and just recognize, acknowledge, accept, okay, that's that, and then just let it go. You know, I don't need to engage with it. It's just a thought, it's just a feeling, it's just an emotion, it's just an idea, it's just an image, it's just a bit of neurobiological activity in my brain or in my gut or whatever. Just note and just accept it. And that doesn't mean passively giving into it, but just in the moment, that's what's happening. This is where we are. You know, how can I most creatively engage with this and use it as you know, turning any obstacles and challenges into resources.
And I guess at that point, you talk about choice. When people perceive that they have a choice, then they open up their future and can find new ways to get to new places. But when people don't perceive they have a choice, even though we know that it's there, they don't perceive they have a choice. And you mentioned Viktor Frankl as a really good example in a concentration camp. He still found the ability to have a choice, and between the ears. What do you think is the key obstacle in people's ability to perceive choice?
Good question. The obvious answer that comes to me is awareness, or lack of awareness. You know, which kind of brings a kind of a sort of circular discussion. It brings us back to the same point. Is you know, once we find awareness, you know, this lack of choice is you know, potentially possibly a conditioned sort of response, just something that we keep telling ourselves, and if we keep acting and behaving often enough as though that's the case, then it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, this is again back to Frankl. He said, you know, the only freedom we have is this ability to choose, and we all have that. It's just not being aware of it, as you say. It's just the blinkering. So helping people to find this bit of space so they can become aware. People usually, in my experience, it usually manifests as people feeling they have no control over what's going on, which of course is true. You know, sort of Damocles, you know, we have very little control over anything, and you know, that's what brings most people to us. Either people are trying to control them and they don't like it, or they're trying to control other people who don't want to be controlled and they don't like that either. So I think helping to get rid of this notion of control and realizing that that's a choice that's being taken at an unconscious level. I mean, that's the point about these choices aren't conscious choices very often. So it's getting people out of their head and back in touch with these parts of themselves that they will never understand or be able to have a cognitive type conversation with, but just an awareness that that whatever is happening, that the choice is being made. I remember when I was learning psychology, the term secondary gain kept creeping in. You know, these people are never going to get better because they've got a secondary gain, as though they're consciously deciding that, you know, I'm you know, going to get my migraines every weekend, so I don't have to look after the kids all weekend and all this. But you know, it's not, they don't take that conscious decision. You know, they work hard all week without a migraine, and you know, the old weekend calls when GPs used to do weekends. You know, there was hardly ever a Saturday morning on call where there wasn't a home visit for someone with a migraine or something who couldn't even get out of bed, or all the rest of it, etc. But by Monday, whatever you did, they were back at work and okay and coping again. And you know, so all secondary gain. But you know, in this thinking, there's no such thing as a secondary gain. It's just a primary gain at an unconscious level. There's that whichever part is driving the bus and making the decisions, and the choice at that point is the bit that is much more powerful. You know, the idea of the horse and the rider. You know, it's the horse is saying, well, we're going that way. It doesn't matter what the rider. You know, I want this, but that's going to happen. You know, and that's where this choice is happening. You know, there's all these different ego states. You know, the ego states theory, you know, there's 150 different ego states active at any one time, and they're all jockeying to be the one driving the bus. And depending on which one actually gets hold of the wheel and gets to do it is what happens. But this is all conditioned in. It's all happening below the level of consciousness.
Uh, and you've used some lovely metaphors there, like driving the bus and the horse and the rider and so on, and they're great metaphors to help us to kind of understand a bit more about ourselves. I always picture those little kind of electrical, chemical communications in our neural pathways, and they're sort of going, "Ooh, we always go this way. Ooh, we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again," and then they stop thinking about it because they can do it on autopilot. Yeah. And it is that autopilot that you're talking about, isn't it? So you get to an and/or gate, and if you don't bring your awareness into it, you'll just continue to do what you always did.
Yeah, the unconscious is lazy, you could say, but it's perhaps again slightly a pejorative term. But if it does something and it worked once, and it does it again, and it works another time, then the more often that it seems to get a result, it'll just default to doing that, because you can't learn to do everything all the time. You need to put some patterning and stuff in there so that you can get on with your life. Otherwise you'd never be able to do a shoe up or get out of a room or anything. You had to go onto Google to work out how to open a door every time you came up to a brass knob in the front. Once you've learned how to do it, that's the way things work, and you crack on with life. So I think these are parts of our natural programming, to use that sort of terminology. They're all in there, and one of the skills is to utilize this stuff, to know that we have this ability to learn useful stuff, but also that we need to know when to unlearn the stuff when it becomes redundant, and there's better stuff. The metaphor I often use with people who come to see me is like a mobile phone. They've got this smart, most people these days got a fancy smartphone and stuff, and if you buy it, and after about 3 months, the little light comes on and says software update, and you think, oh crikey, I'm not going to press that, I can't use it for a quarter of an hour, and all the stuff on won't work anymore. So you leave it, and then 3 months later there's another one, and if you leave it 2 or 3 times, it becomes pretty useless, because all the software you want to run, the operating system can't cope with it anymore. Nothing wrong with the phone at all. It's just that it's just running old software that when it was installed was exactly the right stuff, but it's just obsolete and redundant now. So all you need to do is to have the courage to press the update button and go make yourself a cup of tea for 10 minutes, do something else, and come back and the phone's working perfectly. There was never anything wrong with the phone in the first place. It's just redundant software that was running.
Yeah, I like that analogy. It's a good one. Mark, you mentioned, and I can never get this the right way around, this is where I'm coming to, you mentioned dissociation, but I know in other conversations I've had with you, you're very clear about there being a difference for you between dissociation and disassociation. And I use them interchangeably, and I'm really interested to learn what for you is the difference between those two things.
Well, dissociation, this is my learning. What I should have prefaced all this is that you should be aware, after getting my name right and a bit about my biography and history, nothing that I say after that is true. The question you should be asking yourself is whether it's useful or not. But the kind of my medical teaching and stuff, there was a French psychiatrist, Nancy School, interested in hypnosis in the second half of the 19th century, called Pierre Janet. And he coined the term, 2 terms, rapport, which we use now, and dissociation, French word, and he used dissociation to mean these parts, if you can use that, which are completely out of conscious awareness and conscious access. So the stuff that kicks in, so we have no conscious access to these whatsoever. So a conventional Western trained psychiatrist would be comfortable with the concept of dissociation. And Freud was trained with Janet and used this model of dissociation for his idea of repression. There are things, the unconscious mind, things are so difficult and so unfathomable and so impossible to face that they're just repressed back into a place outside of conscious access. They're still there, and they're still very powerful, and they're providing very important drivers. So these are these kind of unconscious conditioned patterns, if you like, that we dissociate into. And someone sort of drops something, we shout and sort of get distressed without thinking, why, I didn't need to do that. I'm just going to upset, and it's going to take hours to repair, the emotional damage that I just caused. Whereas if I just sort of tolerated and put up with it, etc. So these things are dissociated parts that kick in, which is the point I was making about putting that gap in. So that's dissociation. Disassociation isn't a word that is commonly accepted in Western medical psychological parlance, but this is a conscious activity So much more like I described with this ability with mindful practice to actually, to take yourself consciously to a place where you can observe. So to this dispassionate place. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the Buddhist term, the body keeps the score, wrote about things like trauma treatments, EMDR and stuff. He describes the watchtower and being able to take yourself to this safe distance place and actually sit and observe. The thing I was describing, there's Mark feeling a bit anxious. There I'm all fluttering in my chest. This feels, anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. Then just going out into a place and saying, there's Mark feeling anxious. This is a conscious thing. I dissociated into anxiety. Something happened and the anxiety came from within me. This dissociated part took over the wheel and said it's time for him to be anxious. The disassociation is the bit that when I become aware of it, I can then disassociate and look from this watchtower, this safe place. Hildegard in the hypnosis teaching, he called the hidden observer. When people are taking people into hypnosis, there's a part of them that knows they're being hypnotized. So it's still kind of got a foot in both camps, enjoying the journey of hypnosis, but still knowing that, they're still a part of it. They're not, completely, the kind of the lay understanding of hypnosis where someone's under someone's control and all the rest of it. Which one of
my favourite things. Sorry, Mark, go on.
It's not my understanding of what hypnosis is about at all. It's Hildegard described this hidden observer, the part of us that is in touch with reality, whatever that is. There's a professor, what's the guy's name? I can't remember now. The actor, Robin Williams. Professor Robin Williams. He said, reality, now there's an interesting concept. The bit of us that's in touch with it knows that we're doing some sort of, we're responding to what the agent of change is doing, but also has a foot in reality.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned hypnosis several times, and you've already made the distinction between mindfulness and meditation because they're not. Where does hypnosis sit? If we're sort of doing a little contrast between those three terms.
Crikey. Good question. So hypnosis, mindfulness, and what was the third term?
Meditation.
Meditation. Well, meditation, my understanding, and again, nothing I say is true, whether useful. Meditation, just media center, is the process of coming back to center. So mindfulness is the practice of conscious awareness, and meditation, if you like, would be training in awareness. So it's a practice we do to practice this. It's something that we do. So it involves, usually meditation practices involve some kind of physical thing, relaxing the body in some way, a mental thing, just giving the mind a focus, something to do, essentially emptying the mind and just giving it one thing to be focused on. So it could be an image or a thought, or meditating on an idea or a concept, or it could be a mantra, which is usually a word or an expression. In mindfulness meditation, we use the breathing. So just bringing awareness to the breathing. So that's kind of the three components of that. There are as many different definitions of hypnosis as there are people offering definitions of hypnosis. And the one I did a postgraduate diploma in medical hypnosis, and the definition is about 2 pages long. There's one person, the hypnotist, and another person, the subject or subjects, and the hypnotist does things to change the experience or the belief or the memory or blah, blah, blah. And so it goes on. The definition I like, because it's the one I made up, is that hypnosis it comes in through the mindfulness. It is if you take the practice of conscious awareness, it's the artful use of communication to alter neurology. So it's becoming aware of what's going on and then using your communication. So it could be using spoken language, or it could be using just an expression, just raising an eyelid, and etc. To change. To get some state, so someone is in a passive state and you raise an eyelid and they raise an eyelid back to me, that's a bit of neurology has changed. So some hypnotic phenomena, some hypnotic interaction has taken place there. But more specifically, it's around learning. It's helping them to again, this question about choice and taking people to a place where they have choice. And in terms of intention, I think there's when we're thinking of using these things in a clinical setting, the purpose of mindfulness, the whole point about mindfulness is there is no intention. You practice mindfulness to practice mindfulness, and you know, this is still in the mind, so what you seek can emerge. So whereas if you're using hypnosis with the person, there's an intention with that. You know, they're coming for hypnosis to stop smoking. They're coming for hypnosis to have some control over their weight or their eating or whatever. You know, there's a purpose and intention in a hypnotic practice. But the techniques that might be used once, the point about mindfulness is that it's content free. You know, that we're aiming, all this work is about state, and the single most important factor in getting any outcome we want is our state. And our state is entirely the product of our two things, of our practices. You know, say when we're under duress, under stress, we revolt to a level of training, not to a level of expertise. So it's important to have practices, daily practices that we do that get us into resourceful states. And the other thing about state is a consequence of where we're placing our focus. So putting our focus into the present moment, getting ourselves into a resourceful place, making compassionate connection to self in the moment. And then the mindful state is content-free. You know, there's nothing going on. Content-free, subtle, non-dual awareness. The non-dual is that we're creating our own experience. You know, the subject and object are the same thing. You know, so content-free, subtle, non-dual, non-judgmental awareness just spread uniformly throughout the field. So from within us and throughout space, throughout every part of us. You know, that we're a tiny, tiny atom in a vast and infinite universe, and at the same time the whole of the universe is flowing through us, so we have access, and in this state we have access to this huge quantum field of infinite possibility and resource. So we create this space bigger and wider around ourselves that can hold the problem but also hold all the resources, because they're all there. Everything we need is there in this space.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Does that answer that?
Yeah, well, it does for me.
The other thing I'd like to add, having said that and banging on about Erickson and the influence of Erickson, the idea of hypnosis very often, classical hypnosis, is around about suggestion and the acceptance of suggestion. So Richard Bach, you know, defines Jonathan Livingston Seagull author, he describes hypnosis as the unconscious acceptance of suggestion, which is a nice picture of kind of the classical hypnotist subject type stuff. Erickson, his kind of second generation hypnosis, he used suggestion without doubt and stuff, but the useful thing I learned, and his definition of hypnosis, is the elicitation and utilization of unconscious learning. So again, back to this idea that we have all the resources we need, the intuition, the learning is there, and our job as the agent of change is to create the environment, the healing, Greek word for health, for whole, this holistic environment where this and this can link up. So to create that environment where these two can link and start dancing and making music together. The conscious and the conscious mind can dance together, this cooperative model. So Erickson was very much about eliciting this unconscious learning that was in there, rather than Freud's view of the unconscious mind of this sort of rather lurid place with dark desires and evil spirits and stuff floating around in there. You know, Erickson regarded the unconscious as this huge repository of vast learning and experience, not just of our own experience, but our genes bring us all the experience of 13.5 billion years of evolution. It's all in there, and just finding, you know, getting access to this beautiful place.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the whole principle of, you know, you know, what we're born with. I often use the metaphor of, you know, that piece of stardust, that bright shiny light that we're born with, and somehow we forget about it. And actually, if we could just allow it to come through, but we have to clear some space, as you point out. When you so this, in this current time, we're in COVID-19 lockdown. I don't know how many weeks now, maybe 6 weeks or something like that. 1st of May we're at today when we're having this conversation, 2020. And there's been so much collective contribution to supporting people's well-being through Zoominars, through all sorts of online platforms, and just this general sense that we need to work a little bit at being resilient. And for some people, they were already resilient, so it's just, hey, I can get even better at this. For others, it's, oh, I've got this big space, so I can fill it and do wonderful things with it. But I believe that for some people, they found it quite a distressing time because they've lived their life at 1,000 miles an hour, super busy, never being consciously aware of very much in their lives. And then suddenly the world goes, whoosh, and it's a perfect opportunity for them to become consciously aware of themselves. Do you think that there's a sort of fear of, oh my God, I could get to know me, my potential, but do you think there's a fear in for some people?
That's a good question. I've never really given that any consideration, but I can't say that I've ever come across that as a fear that people have openly expressed. They're afraid of what might emerge, what might come from them. There's certainly fear manifesting it, at the moment, and my coaching business has been as busy as ever in the 6 weeks with the doctor. One of my jobs, I work for a medical charity, providing a resource for doctors who are struggling, who don't want to be labelled as ill or whatever reason they choose to come to coaching rather than to therapy or intervention. So, this super doctor stuff, and we don't get ill and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of fear, and it's generally fear that brings people to come and ask for help, and their coping ability to deal with their fear comes. But I'm not aware of it being fear of what might be emerging from them, but rather this pretty uncertain, unknown future, and particularly doctors in the front line who are in great risk of getting this horrible bug, and just questioning whether what they're doing is really the questioning their vocation a little bit sometimes, how they could be better at using and applying their time. So certainly it's not my experience that people are afraid of what might emerge, but tend to becoming, and possibly just the way I'm working, the stuff I'm doing, the ones who know that there can be more to have a feeling. Part of them is telling there can be more to life than there actually is for them, and not wondering how to actualize and to realize that and bring it out. But the resilience, you've raised resilience, and I think just if I can just maybe say a word or two about that, is that I've been working with doctors for 2 or 3 years since I retired, essentially through the College of Medicine, looking to set up programs to help build resilience, and burnout is a big issue in medicine, and kind of addressing this issue of burnout. And resilience is the word that tends to get used, and it's becoming sort of somewhat unpopular, really, because it's like mindfulness and all these other things. Once it's been around for a while, people get bored with it, and you have to find something else to say. And I think the notion, the model that's emerging, which I find helpful, is this idea of psychological preparedness. So rather than resilience as a protection and something that needs to be there, but rather just building up from within the strengths and abilities to deal with what's going on. So that's kind of the model that seems to be sort of emerging, that people are not another resilience workshop, but if you could start rephrasing it or reframing it in a different way. And I think one of the interesting observations, my interest throughout my career has been emotion and psychological medicine, and pretty much all the terms, all the diagnoses and stuff come from physics and the physical sciences. And so stress is an example of that. Stress is a physical term. The amount is force applied to a system, and resilience the same thing. And I think one of the tricks to help people is to start taking the emotion out of stuff and just put it back to the physical root that it came from. And the resilience of a material is the amount of stress, the amount of external force or internal force, it's the amount of stress that the material can absorb without suffering permanent deformity. And I think this is a really important aspect of why it's a very useful metaphor for this psychological concept stress is something that we feel, and the real key skill in building resilience is the ability to walk away. Is to know when enough's enough. To have some, to build up some strength to cope and be flexible and adjust, but to be able to find that place of equanimity, which is getting back to the mindfulness stuff, where you can just observe and watch going on. So this awareness, being aware and honestly aware with yourself of what's going on, and saying, look, enough's enough, and being able to maintain the smile. This limbic resonance, we have to be able to smile, do what you do seriously with great humor. You have to bring a full skill set. So you need, for the care impressions, you need the compassion and the tenderness, compassion to feel people's pain and suffering, and to want to do something about it. So you need to have that aspect of yourself, but on its own, that's not going to be any good. You're going to be crushed and overwhelmed by the load. So there needs to be the warrior spirit, some determination, strength and fortitude, and the armor and the grounding and shielding that you need of the warrior. And part of the warrior is a good bullshit detector as well. So to know, when's the time that something genuine needs to be done, and when maybe a slightly tougher approach might be necessary. But the third part of the armory is this humor, is to be able to this playfulness, this creative, playful, again, mindfulness, one of the attitudes, child mind, approaching things as every situation is new. What can, how can we make this into an adventure? This challenge, these obstacles, how can we turn them into resources, and let them present their gift to us. So that's for me what resilience is about. We are a thinking person. Where we have a cognitive mind that does the thinking. So being able to cognitively approach stuff, give meaning to our experience, and then also find some self-efficacy. Is okay. This is what I make of it, and this is what I'm going to do to help me deal with it. And when the going gets a bit too tough, this is where I keep the smile and bail out. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. So that's a key resilient strength, is to know when enough's enough. And to have these daily personal habits, so you're building up and building up and building up. So reducing stress and building resource as daily activities, really absolute key. And this is for self and for our environment as well. So this is where we were before this all kicked in. Everything's been derailed over the last couple of months. But the idea, the canary in the coal mine. These doctors getting into difficulty, helping them to get daily habits of preparing themselves. For me, it's teaching them mindfulness. There's yoga classes, there's going for a swim, there's playing an instrument, there's doing whatever they want to do for themselves to refill their barrel, as Virginia Satir used to describe the barrel. And you can't pour from an empty jug, and all these metaphors. You have to be looking after yourself. So building resources, reducing stress where possible. For ourselves, that's the canary, but also the coal mine. You have to start working the systemic changes that need to occur in the working environment, so that stress can be reduced, and the environment made a more friendly, appropriate place to work. So the three really important items that are identified. There's a very good paper by the GMC a few months ago. Nice and simple, ABC. A is autonomy. This ability to choose, so people know that at some point they have to choose, and particularly the ability to choose to walk away. Enough's enough. I can usefully do no more. I need to go and recharge, whatever. B is the belonging. We're a social animal. Resilience is not something we can do on our own. We need other people. We need contact. We need our communion of saints. Not necessarily people immediately around us. I mean, this Zoom has been a great blessing in this, but I remember Golda Meir years ago being interviewed, the Israeli Prime Minister, who's on her own, very isolated place. I think if history is right, the 1960s, the Yom Kippur War, 67 or so. Somebody asked her, when she needed a bit of help and a bit of advice, who did she go to for help? And she said, there's two people, she answered very quickly, two people I always ask when I need a bit of guidance. So I speak to my grandma and I speak to my granddaughter. And say, oh, what do they say to you? And say, well, they can't say anything. My grandmother's been dead for 20 years. And my granddaughter hasn't been born yet, but I asked them both what they would want me to do, and very clear, very quickly. So this sense of belonging. Communities are important to us, of course they are. We know this now. People are missing, people dying, and their loved ones can't be with them, and they can't hold a hand, and all the rest of it. And this is a lot of pathology. but we're a social animal. We need other people, but they're there for us, just like the Golden Mayer example, and this communion of saints that we have that we can access. And then the C is competence. And again, there are two aspects to competence. There are having the skills and the ability to do the things that we need. So we need our own skill sets, so the internal aspects, but there's also external. There's being given the opportunity to use the skills that we have to help. One of my fears in the current situation, the PPE issue, the equipment, is that people know what to do and know how to help, but they're being put into this dangerous position because they're not being given the right equipment so they can go and do the things that they need to do in safety. And so generally they're choosing to do it and put themselves at risk. But I'm sure that people who, the things maybe aren't happening that perhaps could the right things be in place. And the Americans have come up with this concept of moral injury, which I think is a really useful addition to this. Is when this all blows over, hopefully it will blow over and we'll come out of it the other end. I think there'll be quite a lot of emotional and psychological morbidity in the carers, because they knew they could have done stuff if only they'd been given the equipment and the materials and the stuff they needed to do it in the best possible way. So there's this idea of moral injury, knowing that you can do something, but factors beyond your control not allowing you to be able to get on and do it. So those are the three: ABC, autonomy, belonging, being part of something bigger, and competence. So having the skill set yourself and also being enabled by your environment to do the things that are important for you to do, which includes walking away.
That's really powerful, Mark. Thank you. As you were talking about that, and I was, the pictures in my mind were kind of somehow connecting to nature, because nature teaches us about resilience. If a storm comes, then the soft bendy tree manages to bring itself back up again afterwards, and the oak tree, sometimes the stress is just sudden and it shifts, and the tree falls over. But I was also thinking about those artificially grown plants in polytunnels that are given artificial supports, and as soon as they're asked to support themselves, like you buy a little herb plant or something and you bring it home and suddenly it's out of its environment, that's right, and then it dies and you're like, I've just paid $2.99 for that, why didn't? But it's because it has not learned to respond to the environment that it's going to be living in. And I think as a metaphor for our times, that's really important, isn't it? That we should always, even back to the very beginning of time, be preparing ourselves neurologically, psychologically, physiologically for what is to come, so that we've got more choices at each end or gate along the way.
Yeah,
is my take on that.
Yeah, all about state. The coach state, centered, open, i.e. content free, just stuff flowing through, inflow, aware, connected to resources, and creating a holding place so that we can welcome the resources we need as they flow through. There's a place for them to embed and grow and help us. When problems come, we crash, constricted, reactive, analysis paralysis, separated from resources, and hurting. So this is again the crash state that brings people to us. And back to the Buddhist ideas that have advised mindfulness, although people have an idea, there are myths around mindfulness, we were talking about that earlier, that you have to meditate, you don't have to meditate, you don't have to be silent, and you don't have to be Buddhist. But it can certainly silence helps a lot, that's what we're aiming for. But you can just do the washing up and just be aware of the washing up and all the rest of it. So there doesn't have to be silence, you can meditate in those moments and then just be with it. John Kabat-Zinn, one of the great mindfulness teachers, said, to say that mindfulness is Buddhist is like saying that gravity is English, because Isaac Newton described it. It's a human attribute, a human characteristic. The Buddhists have just taken it on and produced a really useful set of instructions and guides as to how to mindfully meditate very well. Where did that come from?
Don't know, but it was great. Thank you. I'm thinking, I know we need to be sort of heading up to wrapping up now, but I'm thinking about a term that I use with my students, which is bandwidth. So the bandwidth of your sensory channels. and how at any one time your thoughts can get all kind of overloading your bandwidth, so to speak, and so you can't then process that easily through the senses. And my take on mindfulness is just an opportunity to it's like a defrag, you know, just clean out the bandwidth, just come back to what is. And it's almost the moment, for me in my experience, the moment I put my attention on one of those erroneous thoughts, it just goes anyway. So,
it's just a thought.
It's just a thought. Yeah, it's just a thought. Yeah,
wake up, lighten up, step up. So, you know, be here now and notice.
Absolutely.
And then this cognitive diffusion, it's just a thought, it's just a feeling, it's just an emotion. In this moment, I can just let it go. Maybe I can re-engage with it at another time, but at the moment, it's just a thought, just a feeling, let it go. Okay, what's important to me? Realign with my values. Okay, what am I going to do? Take action in line with values. So that's the, you know, the kind of behavioural, the way you can take mindfulness into a useful sort of way of being. So you asked earlier, what's a useful thing? That's just a nice, useful little, you know, wake up, lighten up, step up, be here now, notice, noting what's going on. It's your thinking, your feeling, whatever. Okay, it's an emotion, it's a thought, it's an idea, it's an intention. Okay, just for the moment, just let it go. Back to awareness of breathing. And then, okay, done that little bit of practice. Okay, what's important to me? My values, and then take action based on that. Do stuff. Yeah. So motivation is always in the doing.
Always, yeah. You have a phrase, don't you, about it's not learned until it's felt in the bones. Is that your?
Papua New Guinea, nothing is learned till it's felt in the bone.
Yeah.
And again, Eugene Gendlin, the professor of psychiatry or psychology at New York, yeah, they said when you're working with people in a coaching environment, the single most important indicator that they're going to achieve the outcome that they claim is the outcome they want is they can get a felt sense of what it is. So you know, in our hypnotic language, you know, you future pace, you get them to hallucinate what it's going to be like when they have achieved the congruent change that they've identified they want. And if they can get that felt sense, you know, and you can see this is the calibration. Yeah, it's going to feel good. You know, or that does feel good. You know, I'm in that place now. And then so you have them there, and then you disassociate, say, okay, push that back into the future, come on back here. So look, that's what you're headed for, that nice disassociated image, using the language correctly.
I've written it down, I'm on it.
It's disassociated. Yeah, I want that. You know, if you leave them in the associated thing, then, well, I've already got it, don't need to do anything. You know, oh, no, God. And this is where the motivation comes from. That's what I want.
I want it.
And they're on it. Yeah,
I love it. And I guess so there's a couple of things I just want to tidy up. One is that you have a book, a lovely book, at least one that I know of, which is A Bedside Manner.
Yeah.
Show us it, and there we go. Just have
those are real books behind. It's not just a background. Yeah. That's my book. I'm not going to be able to retire properly on the strength of the royalties, but they come trickling in gently. It was published about 2 years ago now. So it's what I taught doctors for 25 years about consultation skills, essentially, and this is really the stuff that we've been talking about. Just what I sought to teach them is just how to be the best them. And so it's not what to do, it's much more about how to do it, and it's all about state and all the things we've been discussing, and motivation and rapport and all that kind of stuff. All the things that we've discussed today, a lot of it's in there anyway. And it's everything I learned in 38 years as a GP, so it's not a very long book. It won't take you terribly long to read it.
Don't believe you. Yeah. And where could we get that?
Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
It's Mr. Amazon for a tenner. I don't know what it is in America, but it's a tenner in the UK, and you can get it on your Kindle for a bit less than that. And there's no pictures to colour in or anything, so it works perfectly well on a Kindle as well. So there's no text and stuff. It started as quite a big book with lots of examples and stuff, and then my publisher then went for it and said, "No, forget all about that. Just to get the examples. There's only one kind of case or one example in there, and it's much more like a primer. So it's a good book for the loo. You know, you can get through it in 3 or 4 visits. You know, each chapter is only just a sort of quick hit with some ideas. So it's just some hooks for people to start putting things on to build a useful consultation with people.
Yeah, I liked it very much. Thank you. So that's that. And also, I just want to say for the record how much I appreciate. I tune into Mark's mindfulness classes every morning. And although obviously I know how to do these things myself and I have access to wonderful resources, I really, really appreciate what you are offering, a handful of us right now at the moment. And it just makes it so easy to go, do you know what? So I've had 2 hours of stressfulness in my morning, not really, but you know, a bit. And then I can just go, right. And Mark can take over, sort my bus out, clear it out, and then I'm good to go for the rest of the day. And I really appreciate that. So thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome.
And Jenny Thornton as well as part of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. On the strength of this recent experience, I absolutely would recommend your mindfulness classes and courses and whatever else you're up to. So that brings us to the next bit. If somebody wants to find you, how do they find you?
Website is probably the easiest thing, which is mctraining.org.uk.
Okay.
And email mewchambers@icloud.com. Mobile phone 0968 046 315.
Cool, that's great. And you can also,
let me say that again, 07968 046 315. I knew there's a number, 07968 046 315. Nothing like being prepared, is
there? We're resilient, aren't we? We just roll with it, whatever.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. I was waiting for that. But
any second now.
And that's thank you for that. And you can always contact Mark through me as well. So I think that's it. I'm sure we could talk. We talk endlessly. We're both a bit sort of. I don't know what the word is. Enthusiastic. So we have to take it in turns. I've absolutely loved listening to you today, Mark, and thank you very much for your time, your patience, your contribution to the world. I think it is great, and it's a privilege to know you and call you my friend and colleague. And thank you very much.
It's been a great honour and privilege to be here. And you know, I mentioned Hippocrates earlier, and one of the parts of the Hippocratic Oath is when we get towards that end of our career, one of the things that's expected of us is we start giving stuff back and all the useful things that we've learned. So part of that's part of the book, and these sort of opportunities are stuff that's taken me a while to absorb and learn. Hopefully, might give other people a bit of a shortcut. My favourite definition of experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. So hopefully, people can get some vicarious experience from this. But nothing I say is true. The question always to ask yourself is whether it's useful. And if you found stuff that's useful here, then take it, make it yours, and absorb it and use it in ways that are right and appropriate and work for you.
Yeah, and that's absolutely my mantra too.
As I approach the foothills of my senility and wander off more and more to the golf course once I'm allowed to, those of you who are picking up the baton can hopefully use some of the things that it's taken me a while to learn and absorb them for yourselves.
But as well as what you've learned, I think that single piece of wisdom, which is about attitude, which is none of us know nearly as much as all of us, and none of us know much anyway, but is it useful? That is such an important phrase, isn't it? Is what you're listening to or looking at, is it useful to the way you are designing your life? Yeah, super. Okay, Mark, thank you very much. And I will end this now, but thank you, Mark. Take care.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.